Hey there, friends. Welcome to Hawkeye Speaks. This morning I'm going to take a moment to talk with you about ecology. What is ecology and what is Gestalt ecology? Now, I have just studied this personally on my own time. I'm not formally educated by university, which may be a benefit to those of you who are endeavoring to understand the world around you. One of my mentors, or people who I greatly admire in the field of ecology, is named Ray Archuleta. Works with soil science, rangeland management. Some of you may be familiar with his work. But Ray Archuleta always starts his talk off by saying that his biggest impediment to learning ecology and the active, ongoing precipitory nature of living systems, the world around us, his largest impediment to gaining that knowledge was his 8 years of education. And that's kind of just funny, and something to take note of is that perhaps there is no system of education in the West that can prepare us for an understanding of the complex nature of the living systems that we are a part of. So I am not against specialized knowledge and expertise, and I have a bit of specialized expertise myself, particularly in the field of woodworking. And there are many areas of study and action that require specialized expertise, and that's great. But there is always a danger to having a singularly focused mentality in any way. And that danger, particularly, is that the more we know about one thing, the less we know about all things. So the title of the talk today is Gestalt Ecology. Gestalt meaning that essentially the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And when it comes to looking at the world around us, the study of ecosystems, which would be, the meaning of the word ecology, it's critical that we take multiple factors into account. And one of the things I want to say right off the bat to tune you into where my thinking is, and hopefully let you know that I have something to add to this discussion, is that I've listened to many people speak about this issue, from individuals from the past to individuals currently, who are looking at ecology from a range of different modalities of thinking. And one thing that I have not heard any one single person say is that, and part of the reason why I'm not just sharing this as my own opinion, but stating it as something that I believe needs to be adopted into the greater awareness, is that science itself is moving on. Science doesn't wait around for people that are stuck with their own ideas. This was something that Lynn Margulis said, and I don't remember the exact quote off the top of my head, but essentially she said that science will not wait around for the people that had false ideas to figure it out. Science will continue moving ahead. And I'm sure you're all familiar with at least some of the developments in quantum physics, which are very interesting, and whether the mainstream science's view of cosmology and how the universe operates is entirely false or not, there have been profound developments made in the field of quantum development and quantum research. And namely, this kind of idea of the uncertainty principle, or also the non-locality of particle, or non-existence actually of atomic particles. That the further we get down and look into substances, what we can find is that there are no fixed particles, atoms. They're all in motion all the time, and it depends upon the position and the role of the observer. We have to take into account the role of the observer to understand the condition of the observation. Okay, this is a key fundamental aspect of quantum physics. And as I said, science is moving ahead while some ideas become dead and old and stale and do not serve us as a people. And what I'm suggesting right off the bat here with Gestalt ecology, and what I have not heard one single person say, is that no matter what your definition of ecology is, it is my feeling that it should say that ecology, the study of ecosystems, is 50% half about the role of the observer. That we can't make any reliable statement about what ecology is without considering what is the state of the ecologist, what is the state of the observer, what is their position, what is the context, okay? And also, a lot of my background in studying, in developing my own intellect and ability to articulate these things comes from studying soil science. And some people say that soil science is 10 years ahead of soil health understanding, is 10 years ahead of human health understanding. And I think that's a worthwhile statement to consider, because there are so many insidious influences in the realm of human health and societal health or unhealth, dis-ease, that we're a little bit more free from in the realm of soil science. Such as one of my heroes in the field of agronomy is Dr. Allan Williams. Now, Dr. Allan Williams spent his career doing genetic engineering in cattle, and he is freely able to speak about how that worked out for him and what his opinions are moving forward. If you're not familiar with Dr. Allan Williams, I recommend checking him out. His company now, he has what looks to be a very successful, and not just a successful, but looks to be a very progressive, very forward-thinking organization called Understanding Ag, and he has some great people on the team there. And also, in addition to having an apparently wonderful company in its actions, he also has his own principles, these 3 principles of, and what he calls them something different, because in his discussions he does also discuss the 6 principles of soil health, and he discusses some other principles, and I forget the word that he uses to define his 3. But they are, in a way, they're rules of nature. They could be called laws of nature, but of course it's a little bit restricting to say rules and laws in our thinking. And principles is a good word. But truly, when we're looking at ecology, principles are something that should be right 100% of the time in 100% of cases. Dr. Allan Williams' principles are DCD: disruption, complexity, diversity. Kind of the other way around. Diversity, complexity, disruption. Number 1, that all systems in nature are stronger the more diverse they are. Number 2, that every action in nature has a compounding and cascading effect. And number 3, that nature responds well to planned, purposeful disruptions. Okay, those principles should be, and I believe that they are, true in 100% of cases. And they're broad ranging. We're not talking about specific types of diversity. We're talking about ecological diversity. And the complexity principle that every action in nature has a compounding and cascading effect. This is critical to understanding kind of the way that actions and interactions flow in nature. And that another key principle that potentially could be added to this, or a baseline understanding of knowledge, is that nothing is static in nature. Everything is continually in flux. And that goes back to relate to what I'm saying about ecology, that considering the context of the observer is critical in using the word at all, in even trying to state what ecology is. We need to consider the societal implications, cultural, and as I'm saying, individual. How is any specific individual prepared to take on the role of observation of nature? Observation and then decision-making about actions. And then part of that, again, that decision-making of actions, and then when actions are carried out, to note that they always have a compounding and cascading effect, that nothing is static or linear. It's a web, the way that things operate in nature. Things are connected, Gestalt. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So let's move on a little bit to my thoughts about ecology. Outside of that, I said 50% of it, 50% should be considering the role of the observer. Now, the other 50%, one thing that I want to state right off the bat here is that I believe there's fundamentally two different types of systems in nature. One, and this is a continuum. There's not a defining line, but there is maybe a point in the middle where we could use ecological thresholds and tipping points, which are concepts that have been well studied and understood. Ecological thresholds and tipping points are critical concepts within the framework of ecology, as well as other ideas such as the stress gradient hypothesis. Okay, but within these two different, fundamentally different sides, on the one side, within ecosystems are able to self-repair. Okay, and on the other side, ecosystems are not able to self-repair. Once they get into a state of degradation, that state of degradation will continue. So we're talking about in nature. And are societies, are individuals natural? Not always. Sometimes societies are behaving quite artificially. And these principles, these rules may not apply to artificial systems. These are principles that should be true 100% of the time within natural systems. Okay, and we have two ends of the spectrum. Systems are able to self-repair and self-heal. And on the other side of the spectrum, systems are not, and they continue in a state of degradation once that has been entered into. And this is something that Allan Savory talks about in his book that he defines as the brittleness scale. And there may be other factors involved in not besides only, brittleness, because of course there's nothing is static in nature, and there's always multiple influences. We don't want to use single factor analysis. We want to look at multiple factors. But the brittleness scale is a good place to start. And what it says is that basically, as I just said, land that is able to self-heal and repair is on this side. It's a wet environment, or it's a temperate. It's an environment that experiences regular moisture through precipitation and effective hydrological cycling. And on the other side, these are not just super dry, but environments that experience long periods without precipitation. That's a critical factor of brittle environments. And once we get into that side of the spectrum, that's where we see lands that are not able to heal themselves. Okay, so now to balance out these two different things that I've said, first, that ecology should be 50% about the observer, and two, that there are fundamentally two different sides of how nature can operate. One, that nature can self-heal and repair, and also that the opposite may be true, that once nature has entered into a state of degradation, that will continue without adequate animal integration. Animals, being all animals, humans are absolutely included in this precipitory role. Now, if we're going to bring that together, those two aspects that I have stated, I believe that there are also fundamentally two different ways of looking at and thinking about environments around us. And one, it's similar to the moist end of the bitterness scale, is the opinion that humans do not need to participate. Humans could be removed from the system, and nature will heal itself. That humans don't have the power to influence. And there are many, many camps that fit within this. There are many people that believe that all of the climate changes that we experience are driven by solar cycles and things completely outside of our control. And there are also there's any variety of complacence, just the feeling that you are powerless and cannot act, which can come about for a variety of reasons, of course. And then there's also, this staunch opinion that humans are the problem and should be removed from the system and nature will heal itself. So there's a variety of camps that fit within this side. that humans are essentially powerless. And again, like I say, the humans should potentially be removed because they are the problem. All right, but there's a whole nother side of the spectrum in which we can view natural environments with the consideration that humans are a necessary piece. And humans, and again, all of animals, that animals are an integral and necessary piece of the actions that are needed. So I'm relating these few different things and trying to bring it into one here, which is that there are these fundamental different ways that we can view the world around us. Number one, we can see in our observation that there are two different systems in nature, one that self-repairs and one that continues in a path of degradation. And then internally, we can really see the same about ourselves and about society, that there's two fundamentally different ways that we can view these systems. One in which we do not have the power to change, and the other in which it is absolutely necessary that we participate in changes that are required to move towards the other side of the spectrum. So another thing that's critical to understand with ecology, this is a fundamental piece of ecology, is to understand succession and the role of actions within this spectrum of succession. And succession, what that word in agronomy, land management, and ecology refers to, is the health of systems moving forward. And it's generally used in that way, succession, because we assume a goal of health, and hopefully we can stick with that we don't want to see the world become a desert around us. So we use the word succession to refer to our view and our observation and our hope that we can move forward in health, and that there are indicator species, and not just plant species, but there's also all types of physical conditions of the environment that we can observe that will give us indication of which way succession is moving. Are we moving forward in health, or are we moving backwards in health? And I'm moving my hands this way or that way without defining that health is on this side or that side. So sorry if I'm confusing there. Just laying out again a spectrum, a continuum, that succession is a term that we use in ecology that clearly delineates this role, and once we have to understand local environmental conditions and plant and animal species to really be able to tap into this awareness. So it takes local, indigenous understanding of the world around us to be able to use this tool of succession, to look out in the world around us and to see, these plants and these environmental features are indicating which way succession is moving. So there's now three different aspects of continuum that need to be taken into account with ecology. And there's also, back to the role of the observer, there are kind of continuums, and there are these spectrums of succession that are also happening in society. And this is something that I want to mention a couple individuals that I have been paying attention to, and one of them in particularly frustrates me quite a bit. Though I do admire his work and I want to align with him more, but I listen to his podcast over and over again, and I never find anything inspiring. I never find anything that promotes this view of an active participatory role in nature. But again, I mean, and I hope it's kosher to mention, I'm not trying to bash these people. I'm trying to build on their work because I do admire them both very much. Anyway, these two characters are named Daniel Schmachtenberger with the Consilience Project and Nate Hagens with the Great Simplification Podcast. And it's Nate Hagens who particularly rubs me the wrong way with his podcast, or just because I don't hear him discussing solutions, and he even strays away from the idea of solutions. And these guys, Schmachtenberger talked about all kinds of stuff. The guy's very smart, and I believe he is accomplished in some other areas of life that I have additional respect for. But when these two are speaking together, they're speaking about the meta-crisis, they call it. And Nate Hagens talks a lot about fossil fuels. He talks a lot about fossil fuels. And unfortunately, in my opinion, he talks about them in a rather static way. And as I had said, nothing is static in nature. All things are continuously in flux. And he gives these equations of how many horsepower there are in a barrel of oil and how many horsepower a human has, and that's rather ridiculous. Nate, if you're watching, I hope we would consider that it's all about the way that we use a barrel of oil or the way that we use potential horsepower. You could see that every individual has a different potential for carrying out actions in nature based on their own fitness. So this is fitness. Not in the, it's up to you. You decide how to look at that word. Obviously, there's the Darwinian implications, and then there's also exercise and health kind of, fitness in that way implications. But what I'm saying is that it's an absolute continuum between a frivolous usage and and an effective usage of our ability to interact with nature. So, excuse me for that. So what I would suggest to Nate and all who are looking at this, and particularly looking at ideas like peak oil or the coming crisis when we run out of fossil fuel, and Nate continually says that our entire economy is driven by the use of fossil fuels. I urge us all to consider that there's much more dynamic complexities involved in this, that of course we have had an extremely wasteful society that has used materials quite frivolously in the past 50, 70, 100 years. And we have had a very fast growth, and that there are repercussions for that. We've got a lot of garbage to deal with. We have a lot of physical garbage, but also garbage content of society in a way. And I don't mean to suggest that any person is garbage, because I think every single person has potential, and is not only has potential, but is needed to be a participant in the active role of engaging with natural systems. So, but we've got a lot of garbage in here, is what I mean. A lot of garbage that clouds the thinking of being able to actively interact with nature and to take positive actions. So they talk about the meta-crisis, and these guys again are very intelligent, and they have done more research and probably done more study in some specific areas than I probably ever will, and they are potentially more well-spoken than I or some of us will ever be. But it doesn't negate the fact that they certainly may be missing some very important things. And let's see, so where do I want to go with this? I'm not going to go on too long with this particular talk on Gestalt ecology. Just want to kind of encourage a little bit of diving into this different type of thinking. But I want to shift gears for just a second before I continue talking about these two individuals, Daniel Schmachtenberger and Nate Hagens, with his Great Simplification podcast. I would say the podcast, The Great Simplification, is indicating that we're about to enter into a great simplification where people are going to have to severely dial back the amount of consumption. And the whole thing is rather comical to me, because I moved out here off the grid 25 years ago. And even before that, in the 90s, I saw this stuff happening, and I endeavored to go back to a simple life. And I have done that. I have absolutely done it, but I've also paid the price for it. I have lived in extreme poverty. I have alienated people and end up being in a position where I'm quite alone, without a lot of society interacting and even family interactions, because I chose to take this route of the Great Simplification on my own accord long ago. And so I could give a little bit of feedback about what it's like to greatly simplify. Number one, I can say it's great. It's totally easy and totally doable to lower your footprint. We could measure our footprint in terms of gallons of gasoline used, however you want to personally calculate that, or kilowatt hours. Lower it down, not cut it in half, but lower it down 600, 1,000%. I mean, it's possible to live a very full life and a very happy life with much, much, much less consumption. But if you alienate yourself from society and family, that's not good. It takes community. It takes a village to raise a child. It takes a community to really make successful, significant change. And for any one individual to bow out and say, okay, I'm ready to greatly simplify, you can see that there are potential negative consequences. Just as if we enter into a forced simplification and people are not ready to work together, it's going to be the same. It's going to be the same where people are going to potentially have very miserable existences in conditions in which it could be wonderful if they just had the support of each other. So again, I want to change gears for just a second and say, what are these people? What do potentially I know that these people don't know? And I want to throw in a few other names here, or not necessarily names, but I'll, as I indicated, I've studied soil health and land management, soil science quite thoroughly. And I could rattle off a list of 10 or 100 names of people in soil science, but I'll skip that part and just say, if you yourself are into soil health, or if you have followed some of these wonderful voices in agronomy, what nearly all of them are lacking in, that potentially I have to offer, is that they don't live in arid environments. They don't live in desertifying lands. And one of the primary reasons for that, and Ray Archuleta I did mention, let's use him as an example. Ray Archuleta is actually from New Mexico. All of New Mexico is a desertifying land, is undergoing this condition of desertification. And that's one of the reasons why Ray Archuleta left this place, is so that he could farm and ranch more successfully in the Boot Hills of Missouri, where it is quite fertile. And that is an occurrence that we might see happening, is that someone who is from or came to this area or any area of the world that is severely desertifying would have the impetus to leave these places, because once you learn about arid ecology, it's a bit depressing, because we don't have the societal actions necessary to counter what's happening. So what I potentially have to offer that all of these people are lacking is that I live in a desertifying land. And again, ecology is 50% about the role of the observer. Some of these things about studying ecosystems cannot be learned simply from reading books and watching lectures, or documentaries or whatever. It takes actually understanding what's going on around us. And I had mentioned secession and how we need to understand some local conditions, such as plant species and environmental features. Features such as what is an arroyo, a washout? How did that happen? And in a natural, healthy ecosystem, would we see severe drainage, erosion problems on land that is not very steep? Is that natural and normal? Or in a healthy ecosystem, would we not ever have this problem of arroyos cutting through roads and cutting through little low valleys and creating these giant ditches, So it takes a knowledge of, and sometimes it takes a physical location within these environments. And again, so I'm not tooting my own horn here and saying that potentially I have something to offer that these people are missing, because I hope there's a lot of other people like me as well, and I know that there are at least some. I personally had my entire world changed when I read Allan Savory's book, Holistic Management, a new framework for decision making, and it certainly is. I actually lived out here for 20 years before I got tuned in to this active participatory nature of the world around me. I had an inclination, as many people do, to view the world around me as static, as the way that it is, in this very kind of reductive sense, until I learned about this Gestalt ecology, that things are continually changing around us, and that it is our actions in many cases that determine those changes. Here in this environment, there is a very limiting, reductive story about how, oh, it used to be grasslands out there, oh, and it used to be forest out there, but then the Spanish brought all their sheep, and the sheep overgrazed, and then the sage came, and now the sage is taking all the water. And that is the story. You'll hear a different version of the story all over the world, but it is simply not true. It is a very reductive approach to a complex situation that diminishes our own understanding as well as our understanding of the participatory role that we could be playing. Whereas what's really happened with these desertifying lands is that, and again, back to the scale of, there are two fundamentally different types of environments. There are lands that will self-heal, and here it's time to introduce the concept of rest, which Allan Savory discusses very thoroughly in his book when he talks about the brittleness scale, is that within this side, the tool of rest works. You leave lands alone to rest, and they grow back, they heal. But on the other side of the spectrum, the tool of rest does not work. It takes animal integration, and we can see these cycles of degradation continue without appropriate animal integration. So, again, what am I potentially seeing that these other people are not seeing? Well, I'm already indicating that I'm tuned into this role, and that we have the ability to move ourselves onto a, there's the two different forms of ecosystems, and there's also the two different forms of thinking. One in that humans don't have a role to play. Humans should even be removed from the system. And on the other side of the spectrum, that humans are absolutely necessary along with other animals. Animals are necessary components of the system. And that every action that we take is compounding and cascading in its effect. Okay? So, what I have personally experienced and seen, and in learning about soil health, what is soil health, is that these concepts are understood within agronomy, that bare ground is terrible. Bare ground can, and particularly in regards to temperature, bare ground can be double the temperature of ground that is covered in diverse plant cover. Okay, you can see 75 to 150 degrees. And of course, we're all familiar with this idea that the earth, if you dig down into the earth, you'll get to a steady 55-degree temperature. That the temperature of the earth is regulated from some internal means, but also where exactly is that line? Is it, you have to go down 3 feet? You have to go down 5 feet? You go down 2 feet? Well, what I want to indicate is that what soil is, living soil, it's the mitigating factor of all energy fluctuations on Earth. But it is also, another way to think about it is the clothing. Okay? When nature has no clothes on, she gets wildly hot in the day and wildly cold at night. And and all energy is fluctuating wildly. Whereas when nature has a healthy coating of soil, and my last talk is about what soil is, so go back and check that out if you desire. But it's a living matrix in which as I said, mitigates all energy fluctuations, and temperature is chief amongst them. Okay, so again, to say what have I seen that potentially other people haven't seen? Well, this picture of bare ground within agronomy, agricultural settings, is well understood, that tillage destroys biology, that removing all of the plant cover and having fallowed lands with the bare ground is quite detrimental to ecosystem health. That you lose the, of course, we've stripped away the plant diversity, and then we lose microbial diversity, and we eventually lose all of our stabilized organic material, carbon, from the ground, and we lose the effective soil carbon sponge. Well, what I have seen and experienced is that this is the condition of desertification. We lose plant diversity, we lose soil health, we end up with bare ground, which is basically dirt, and we have a catastrophic warming condition that is caused simply by that. and not only warming, but we lose the ability to have effective hydrological cycling. And then back to the very beginning, with ecology and the role of the observer, water cycles are really quite easy to understand in the very basic sense of what is water cycling and what is effective hydrological cycling that we would like. And again, back to the beginning, the foundation, something that Allan Savory talks about is that if you sit down with people from even the very most disparate, different types of people, different groups, people will generally can align on their real core, holistic, true, shared common values. One of which being that we would like to see clean water that runs down the streams year-round. So not just water flowing in the stream that's clean, but also this idea of year-round consistent flow. And that is something that nearly anyone and everyone will agree to, that we would like to have clean air to breathe and clean water flowing year-round in the streams, and springs. So how do we get there then is the absolute question. Well, what I have seen is that and experienced is that desertification is a much, much, much larger issue than agriculture, okay? And within desertification, we also have deforestation. Deforestation is a huge issue. And humans have been cutting down the largest trees out of the forest and clear-cutting forests for so much longer than the current fossil fuel boom that it's amazing, it's absolutely amazing to me to see individuals like Nate Hagens placing all of the blame on fossil fuel usage, because there's something else going on here. There's something else that's been going on since long before the consumption, the harvesting and the usage of hydrocarbon fuels. Okay, so what I have personally experienced is that it is absolutely not that hard for humans to influence this secession from lands that are in a state of degradation to lands that can heal themselves. And it is also necessary that humans act in that role. And that we can, with the use of ruminant animals, particularly using ruminant animals as herds, the way that nature developed the system, the herd and predator system, we can repair desertifying lands. And this can also be artificially stimulated by applying not just, don't use the single factor analysis, a super simple way to think of this, that, if we just went out and put mulch on the ground, or we just went out and put compost, or we just went out and sprayed microbial inoculant. You really have to think we need to do all three of those, okay? And we need to then bring the animals in. And we need to use other principles such as start with your best area and timing is everything. Principles, those are some principles from Alejandro Carrillo with Pasticultores del Desierto, wonderful organization in northern Mexico, which is using only the tool of cattle as herds to not just heal lands, but to transform hard pan-Chihuahuan desert into fertile herb lands that have 4 to 6 foot tall grasses and herbs growing that you can get lost in. This is the work that they're doing is absolutely phenomenal. And that's what I was saying about there are other individuals that understand this, and that's an understanding that I am bringing to this discussion personally, is that I know this to be true. I have enacted some of these solutions on my own land, and I have personally met Alejandro Carrillo and other folks engaged in these practices and seen, I haven't been to his ranch, but I've seen his photos. And it's absolutely incredible to see the difference. And once you take that difference into your mind, again, the role of the observer, we can begin to see, again, the role that humans play in determining how we're going to end up, how ecosystems are going to end up around us within either the state of being able to self-heal or the state of continual degradation. How the real factor that determines it is the humans and the other animals, the way that humans interact with animals. Now we've moved into a point in Earth's history where humans have become so critical to this. It doesn't go the other way around, where the more we are destructive to environments, the more we should be removed. No, it's the other way around, where the more environments around us have been destroyed, the more we should repair. Okay? Aldo Leopold, a great ecologist, spoke about how every tool that we use can be used either destructively or beneficially to environments. And this is critical to understand. Drake, the Korean natural farming, wonderful Korean natural farming instructor in Hawaii, also talks about this and helped to key me into this big picture understanding that every single action we take has the ability and will have the consequence of either creating or destroying microbial life. And we can see that within the realm of destroying microbial life, we can use practices such as tillage and paving over wetlands and putting in parking lots and chemical usage that will directly destroy biology. Okay, but on the other side, it's a bit more complex. How do we create biology? Well, we can foster healthy ecosystems around us. We can take part, the participatory role of humans and animals within ecosystems. This essentially is Gestalt ecology. But we can also understand that humans have the ability to literally cultivate, as in brewing, and composting is something that's well understood, but within the realm of Korean natural farming and other types of fermentation and bacterial and fungal microorganism cultivation, we can see that we have the ability to proliferate organisms of living organisms and apply them to the land in vast quantities by this cultivation. I'm going like this because well, I'm sure most of you are familiar with this. Like when you make a ferment of some kind, an active ferment, we're increasing the numbers of biology, and they increase exponentially under the right conditions. And even the wrong conditions, you'll see an explosion of biology that you don't want. So life will do its own things, as again, with the right conditions provided. Okay, so it's taking this fundamentally two different sides of nature, that nature can repair itself, nature's in a continual state of degradation, and realizing that humans are a huge influencing factor, if not the linchpin within the entire system. So, like I said, I'm gonna keep this relatively short here, just introducing this concept of Gestalt ecology. And how I would define ecology is that the study of ecosystems should be 50% focused on the observer. Is someone prepared to observe the conditions around them? Do they have some of the knowledge that's necessary to be able to understand succession, as in to read the plants and the simple environmental conditions that are present around them, and to determine which way succession is moving, and to understand which actions could be taken to move the direction of health in the way that we want, which is hopefully towards healthier, more diverse, more resilient. And again, I think that you could sit down with people from even the very most disparate of groups and get people to agree on kind of a basic foundation goal that yes, we do want to move towards health. We do want to have more diverse and resilient ecosystems. I think that people will essentially unanimously agree that we do want that. And if we can start with that, understanding that is something we want, because if you don't have a goal, a lot of times it's not really that effective to talk about anything. I mean, so the goal: clean air to breathe, clean water that runs in the streams year round, and a place where our children and our children's children can go on thriving. So I like to start with that instead of going into this meta crisis. It's all dismal, where humans are destined to fail and die a miserable death. Come on, guys. And I have too much respect for these intelligent individuals out there to just completely write them off. I hope that people will and whether these couple people actually listen to my talk or not, I hope that by making this, I'm just putting a drop in the bucket and influencing the tide of secession amongst us observers. That we can, and also there's, again, I mentioned how some people believe that all of the climate is dictated by solar cycling and cosmological events. Well, I would have to influence that crowd as well to understand, to gain some understanding around what Gaia theory is. Gaia, you could just use the word Gaia or the Gaianthropocene, as Matt Segal defines it. Matt Segal is a philosopher who is perhaps in the West one of the absolute most brilliant minds that we could look to currently. I highly recommend you check out his channel. It's called Footnotes to Plato. This guy's brilliant. But again, I don't know if he has this understanding that I have, that I learned from folks like Alejandro Carrillo, of how we can influence desertification and turn the tide of secession around towards health. Because if you don't know that, number one, many ecosystems of the world will not self-repair. They are beyond the tipping point. Ecological thresholds have been crossed, and it takes animal integration. And then you don't have this understanding that the animal integration, with humans being the huge part of this precipitory system, can be extremely effective. And we have to think of more than 5 minutes out into the future. We need to think in 5 years and 10 years. Right? We have to employ some long-term thinking, some holistic thinking here. But to have that understanding that we can influence things incredibly, and of course, I mean, a lot of these people are starting with the understanding that humans do influence incredibly, but it's always with this presumption of influencing towards destruction. And that's not always the case. Humans can absolutely influence towards health. So, all right, I'm going to pretty much wrap it up there. And I'm happy to continue discussing more about this. So leave your thoughts in the comments and which areas you would like for me to speak more directly about. I can make talks that talk about just kind of one specific piece of this if there's people that want to understand more of it. So please do interact and let me know what you think. And yes, so again, ecology, 50% about the observer. How is each individual prepared to observe the environments around us and make decisions? Hey, sweetie. And then yes, ecology there's nothing static about it. It's always changing around us. And then within that, there are fundamentally kind of two different sides. The self-repair and the self-destruction, and that we can and need to influence towards the self-repair and away from the self-destruction. That humans are not just a self-destructive force. Humans can work in either fashion. Just like I said, this knowledge that every action we take either creates or destroys biological life. And just to think about that, are we creating biological life around us? Are we leaving a trail of life behind us? And just imagine that in your mind in a kind of a cartoon fashion, that like you're walking along and flowers are popping up behind you, or you're walking along the earth and there's trash behind you. I mean, this is a fundamental difference that both are very true. The story of Johnny Appleseed that went around planting trees, planting trees. That's an example of this proliferation of a trail of life behind a certain individual. And then I'm sure we all have can easily imagine the picture of a destructive individual that just leaves garbage behind. So that's another factor of the observer. One is how is the observer prepared to interact with environments around us? And then how is the observer behaving within this context of completely destructive or completely beneficial to the environments? Again, every single tool that we use can be either a benefit or a detriment to the environment. And once we begin to understand these processes of hydrological cycling, nutrient cycling, we can see that it's possible to manage forests. There is plenty of timber available for harvesting without cutting down all of the largest trees in the forest, without clear cutting. There's plenty of mountains that can be accessed for ski resorts without putting an incredibly destructive road right up through the heart of the entire ecosystem, which is the riparian area. And this is something that is done over and I'm using ski valleys as an example. I'm pointing back that way because Taos Ski Valley's back there. And Taos Ski Valley runs its lifts on diesel generators because the power from the electric company is not consistent enough. They need the power. So they pump the diesel fuel. They pump it up and they drive not everyone, but many people driving their own vehicle up there, one person per car, on a road that is situated in many cases about 2 feet above the water level. Okay, now does a road going up the riparian area where the road itself is 2 feet above the water flow, does that leave room for beavers to build dams and to create healthy ecosystems themselves? Because beavers are one of these keystone species, just as humans are, as I've been indicating, that majorly influence the tide of succession. So that's where I'm going to leave it for today. Thank you for watching Hawkeye Speaks. Please like, share, and subscribe. All right, everyone. Hope you're doing well today. Gestalt Ecology 101.